British are coming, the British are coming.
Now the ride of Paul Revere set the nation on its ear, and the shot at Lexington heard round the world. When the British fired in the early dawn,
and so this high-held word liberty has come to shackle and enslave us.
Hoo-ah! Welcome to Backseat Filmmaker, the show where we let the filmmakers do all the heavy lifting while we sit in the back and bitch about it. I'm Ryan Bijan, thanks for joining me. 30 years ago, Warner Brothers released a film that seemed like it had everything going for it. A mammoth historical epic with a cast of thousands led by Al Pacino, Donald Sutherland, and Natasha Kinski. The director Hugh Hudson was no slouch either, having previously directed the Oscar-winning Best Picture Chariots of Fire. On paper, Rev-o-lution sounds like it's a real winner, so why haven't you heard about it? It was released to little fanfare in 1985 and bombed at the box office, making only $350,000 on a $28 million budget. In 1776, Tom Dobb is a simple fur trader traveling to New York to start a new life with his son Ned. When they arrive, the city is ravaged by angry citizens preparing to stand up against the impending British army. Due to a misunderstanding, Ned is drafted to fight in the Continental Army, forcing a reluctant Tom to enlist in a war he believes he has no stake in. Their only ally in this turbulent period is Daisy McConaughey, the passionate and patriotic daughter of British loyalists, who gives up her life of comfort to fight for the American dream. Alright, today I am here with author and filmmaker Joey Monroy.
Thank you for calling me an author too, that's awesome.
I mean, you are a writer, so I think it's safe to say. Had you ever heard of this film before?
No, never. I mean, maybe in passing on like Rotten Tomatoes or something, but since its rating was so low, I was like, didn't really hit me as a movie that I'd want to watch.
And that's such a bizarre thing. I don't know how many people I've asked, have you seen Rev-o-lution? Have you heard of this movie? And they're like, no, what's that? And I said, well, it has Al Pacino, it has Donald Sutherland, it has Natasha Kinski. And people are surprised. They're just like, that sounds amazing. How have I not heard about that? And that seems to be sort of the general, consensus.
Rev-o-lution. A word spoke everywhere.
I thought it was not going to hit me emotionally. I didn't think it was going to be an exciting movie, honestly. Mostly
really, just because of the reputation.
Just because of its reputation, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm really susceptible to that. If a lot of people say something like terrible about a movie, I'm probably either not going to watch it or watch it with a very low view of it. But you got me excited to watch it, and so I watched it, and from the initial credit sequence, I was like, I'm down for this, because it's just, they had like the red sort of gothic font letters over black, and then over a bunch of people rioting, pulling a King George statue down, and the music is like ominous and menacing, and it just prepares you for the rest of the movie. It immediately puts you in this sort of gritty, sort of real revolution where people just seem passionate about something that's going on. And it puts you right there with them. And at the right after that credit sequence, I was open for anything, honestly.
The thing is, the production value is there. Like, you read this movie cost $28 million to produce, and it's on there on the screen. The production design, the sets, the costumes, and I know this phrase is thrown around a lot. Dark and gritty, dark and gritty. But you look at this movie, it really is gritty. It almost does look like a documentary because of how authentic it is. This isn't your clean-cut Revolutionary War picture, Technicolor, Hollywood-looking film. I don't believe in hyperbole, but this probably is the closest you could get. If you had a time machine, you went back to 1776, and you were able to record it, this is probably what it would look like.
Definitely. I mean, yeah. I mean, when I say dark and gritty, I don't mean like the recent DC movies, Dark and Gritty, or anything like that. Where it's just dark and gritty just for the sake of being dark and gritty. I mean, this is in the best way possible. Very documentary-like. I mean, in certain points, it seems like it's going to teeter over into a Werner Herzog movie, like a Aguirre Wrath of God or Fitzcarraldo, where people are just like rumbling around in the middle of like the nature, like the actors committing completely to running around in the mud or like getting wet. Al Pacino has that scene where he's carrying that dummy around that's completely wet, and it clearly weighs like a lot. I mean, he's clearly having trouble with it, but Hugh Hudson, like, just in a single shot, just watches Al Pacino struggling with this thing. I mean, these are things that are putting actors in positions that, I mean, not everybody would do, you know what I mean? You can clearly tell that everybody's focused on what they're doing. You can clearly tell that the documentary reality of it is for a purpose, and it works.
I'll go where I want.
No, you're staying here. Nate, listen. You seen them bodies floating in the river? You seen them? What are they? They're just boys like you.
This is one of the things that got me interested in this film, was the fact that it stars Al Pacino. If you couldn't tell, I'm a huge Al Pacino fan, obviously. I grew up on gangster movies. I love Dog Day Afternoon, The Godfather, Scarface. Just a huge fan of his tremendous body of work, because he is one of, I think he is one of the great American actors. And I don't just mean that contemporary, I mean of all time. I think he ranks up there with Humphrey Bogart, or, you know, Clark Gable, Spencer Tracy, these iconic movie stars. Mm-hmm. And he's not necessarily a John Wayne type who's just like, John Wayne is John Wayne. Any movie you watch him in, that's his persona, that's who he is.
It's a movie star persona.
Which is fine.
Yeah.
That works. Like, a lot of actors have that great charismatic movie star persona. But Al Pacino, in his prime, like, none of his two roles are the same. Michael Corleone is not Tony Montana. Is not, you know, Sonny Warchuk from Dog Day Afternoon. They're three completely different characters. Or Frank Slade from Scent of a Woman. And here, he's Tom Dobb. He's this fur trapper who's coming to this... He's trying to start over, start a new life with his son. I thought he was brilliant in it, but it's one of those often criticized performances because of the accent he does.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I had problems with it too, up until you told me. I think you told me, like, during the movie, that his accent was very well researched, that he had a coach who basically, you know, knew what he was doing, knew what he was teaching Al Pacino, and, you know, apparently the accent... And we saw that in the interview, in the special features between Hugh Hudson and Al Pacino. They addressed the fact that the accent was actually very well researched. That's probably the closest that English, you know, that's probably the closest that English sounded at the time. And so, I mean, if they're saying that, then I bought it.
It works for me.
And it didn't bother me to the point where I was like, you know, stop talking, Al Pacino. You know what I mean? Not as much as Donald Sutherland's character, for example, who just sounded like a pompous sort of. Bad guy for the sake of being bad, you know what I mean?
Good, son. We'll get you a drum of your own. Cross me, and I'll pop out your glim. Corporal! Yeah.
His even when I watched Rev-o-lution the second time, the original cut, I had headphones on and everything. I was watching, you know, on my computer, and I could not understand what he was saying a lot of the time. I mean, it was just this sort of bulbous voice that, you know.
Donald Sutherland's really interesting in this movie because he's a Canadian actor, and then he's sort of associated with American films, the father of Kiefer Sutherland, and he's had a long, wonderful career. But when he was younger, he did sort of make a name for himself playing villains or heavies in British films. Mm-hmm. Just playing these over-the-top bombastic characters, mm-hmm. but he's not really quite the sophisticated Englishman in real life that he would often play.
Yeah.
I first discovered Rev-o-lution because I was flipping through a book. This was actually a few months ago, and it's like the worst castings in movie history, something along the lines of that. And you had, you know, John Wayne as Genghis Khan in The Conqueror, Gary Cooper as Marco Polo. Just sort of like,
yeah.
okay.
I mean, yeah. Well, there are a bunch of odd. I mean, you can pick out a million of those, you know what I mean? But I think Rev-o-lution just isn't one of them.
Oh, absolutely.
I think every character in that movie works in their role. You know, every character, like I said, they were passionate about everything. You know what I mean? You could tell that they were that they were focused, that they knew what they were doing.
Now let's get the one running with the fox.
I guess one character that I did have problems with was the fop character, the English sort of.
Let's discuss that, because in the film,
Richard O'Brien.
Richard O'Brien from the Rocky Horror Picture Show, Riff Raff, if you don't know, he plays this one of the sergeants or generals.
Yeah,
like, in the English Army.
He's just a weird character in general. I mean, and it's one of those characters that threatens to just.
It takes you out of the movie.
It does. It takes you out of the movie, and it's like, well, is this? What are we supposed to be doing? You know what I mean? What are we supposed to be feeling in this situation? Because he's got this accent. He's got this ridiculous accent. He's got the makeup, you know, the powder on his face, you know, the blush or whatever on his cheeks, the white wig, and he's literally just screaming commands at everybody, you know what I mean? And just this high-pitched sort of ridiculous clown voice, and I really don't, whenever he was on screen, it completely took me out of the experience.
You bitch! Bloody Yankee bitch! Your daughters are whores, madam. All of them. Whores!
Okay, it's funny you say that because, again, going back, this movie is presented in such a realistic, almost documentary manner that politically, it doesn't really ask you to choose sides. You know, the Americans, at the beginning, the colonists who were rebelling, they steal Tom Dobbs' boat. Yeah. They literally force him at gunpoint, him and his son, to sign up and enlist in the army. And it's just, it's a very horrible, dark, depressing time to live in. But the thing is the English are even worse in the fact that everything else is presented so realistically. The English villains are all very cartoony.
Yes,
they're all caricatures. Donald Sutherland, Richard O'Brien, you Yankee bitch, like oh tally ho, pip pip cheerio. Like he literally says that in the movie.
So ends the American dream, eh? What? Come on, tally ho.
And with Donald Sutherland's character, they did. I mean, as like whenever you have a villain in the movie, you can tell that you're trying to make, or whenever you're writing a villain into a movie, you want him to make them either the exact opposite or the exact same as your hero or whatever. And they even have the Donald Sutherland character with his little. Is that his son? Is that
Sergeant Peasy is the character's name, which I don't even think they say that in the film.
Exactly, and I mean they try to. I guess they try to make him sort of like the anti, the opposite of Al Pacino's character. But I mean, there really isn't much there to work with. Like you never see him really care about that little kid that's with him, his son or whatever. You never really see that relationship, and I think that's one way that the filmmakers could have improved on the British side of things, is have them actually interact with each other.
Have them three-dimensional characters.
Exactly.
Sure,
have them at least care about that kid. You know what I mean? There's this one scene where I think the kid is asking if those people are dead, and there's this like graveyard, and he's asking, "Oh, are these people dead?" And Donald Sutherland, in a few comments, just literally just brushes him off. Like,
it's like,
doesn't even look at him or anything. He's just like, "Oh, don't worry about it."
They're just resting. They're sleeping.
Exactly. I mean, no heart there. You know what I mean? No affection.
Let's not forget one of the best supporting actors in this film, Donald Sutherland's mole.
Yeah, I know. It was so random. I had to figure out what it was at first. Like, I don't know if it was like a smudge on the film, and then as you got closer, you could tell that they even put a lot of work into like making it hairy and making it really stand out as a alternate character. You know what I mean?
I wonder whose idea was that. Was that Hugh Hudson's? Was Donald Sutherland like, I need to bring some flavor to my character?
He was looking in the mirror and he was just like, you know what I need for this role? A mole.
You need a mole.
He probably looked at the script and he was like, oh, there's not much here. I need to add some more dimension to my character. And he literally added more dimension to his face. He was more affectionate with the mole than he was with his little kid son. Or
his own son, yeah. And then on the home team, on the winning side, as Al Pacino's love interest, you have Natasha Kinski as Daisy McConaughey.
Mm-hmm. I wish they wouldn't have gone the love interest route. Almost, it almost feels tacked on. You know what I mean? It almost feels like, oh, they need to love each other. You know what I mean? Just because it's a guy, it's two main characters or two very well-known actors in a movie.
Yeah.
I wish they just made it platonic. You know what I mean? A platonic passion for the revolution, I guess, for the war.
What did you think of Natasha Kinski's performance?
I thought she was good. I thought she did a good job with what she had. I mean, she's obviously not a very well-rounded character, but I wanted to see more of her. You know what I mean? I wanted to see more of that passion. There was that scene in the original cut where she's overhearing her dad talk about how it doesn't matter, it only matters what side wins. You know what I mean? And so she comes over, and you can see that she feels for the Americans, you know what I mean? She feels for her people, and that's the sort of thing that made me identify with her. And in a movie about the American Revolution, you expect it to be a movie filled with men fighting each other, and you expect it to be a man's movie, you know what I mean? And there's actually scenes dedicated to showing this woman's life in the middle of the war, in the middle of this unorganized society, trying to figure out how to kick the British out, you know what I mean? And I think it works.
I agree with you to a degree, but the thing is, the way Daisy McConaughey... I don't like Natasha Kinski. I think her performance is fine. Mm-hmm. In the film Daisy, she's a daughter of this very aristocratic, pro-English family. They support the British, and that's her thing. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's a little bit her, but it's mostly the screenplay, I think. The way Daisy's written, yes, she does bring a softness to it. It's great to see her passion and how gung-ho she is about supporting the rebels.
Yeah.
But she almost comes off as sort of like a petulant, she's the spoiled teenage daughter. She wants to rebel, just to rebel, fuck you, Mom, I'm gonna do what I want, and
I think British! Wait in my room! You bitch!
I mean, I feel like teenage girls always want to find something to rebel against, you know what I mean? But something to sort of...
the revolution gives her an excuse to rebel against.
It very much so, but I mean, and it's easy to sort of rebel against something because it's the side that everybody takes, you know what I mean? And immediately you're immediately you're a hero or whatever. But I do think it works for her character. I think it makes her stand out from basically every single other woman in the movie. I mean, you know what I mean? Everyone else is literally just like, there's that scene where she's where one of her sisters, I guess, is just like, oh, I guess we get the pick of the lot or whatever, talking about the British men.
The cream of the crop.
The cream of the crop, exactly. And it's just like, I'm glad there is an opposite of those characters. You know what I mean? There is somebody that's against. There's the anti-argument of that, which is that there were women fighting alongside the men.
Absolutely, but the thing is, again, it's not necessarily the politics. Like, it's great. I'm glad that Natasha Kinski's on our side. But it goes back to everything being sort of one-dimensional. Definitely, they're like cardboard stereotypes, like Cinderella sisters. Essentially, that's just how they're portrayed. They're not really given a lot of dimension or depth. They're just there to be mean, and she's there to be the good guy.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, Bernard Lutich, the cinematographer, he definitely makes it look, as opposed to Greystoke, where everything looks picturesque and sort of epic and majestic and beautiful, this movie is definitely more of a documentary in style. And so it's you still have beautiful images. There are these wide compositions of like fields or the army marching or anything, which are fantastic. But I think the movie's handheld style, the movie's handheld cinematography, I thought it was a great addition. It was a great idea for the movie because it definitely puts you in the feet of Tom, and it definitely makes you feel for him. It definitely puts you closer to the action.
What's interesting about that, though, is that now handheld cinematography, it's so ubiquitous in feature films, we take it for granted. Like, we don't even notice it anymore. In a big budget $300 million movie like Man of Steel, every single shot, it's like Zack Snyder has Parkinson's. So we don't really think about it. And when you go back and watch this film through a modern lens, it does look like any other film. But at the time period, it was controversial. It was, no pun intended, revolutionary. Because people didn't do that. It was only used for documentaries.
And there was definitely intention to it. There was a reason for it. It wasn't, oh, let's just do handheld for handheld just because, you know, we'll shake up the scene and that'll make people want to watch more. It's definitely handheld for a reason. Yeah. And I think it was a great choice.
Earlier, you likened it to a Werner Herzog film. And Natasha Kinski, you know, being the daughter of Klaus Kinski, batshit crazy Klaus Kinski, who was the star of many, if not most, of Werner Herzog's pictures. Yeah. So,
I mean, maybe he forced her to do this movie or something like that. Maybe he read the script and he was like, I need my daughter in this role. I need her to do a crazy, like, you know, rebel role or whatever. I don't know. I mean, I know that Natasha Kinski was chosen over Glenn Close or something like that, right? Wasn't she up against?
I don't know about that. Glenn Close, I don't think would have been right for the role.
Me neither. And I think Natasha Kinski was a stretch too from a like pre-production standpoint. You know what I mean? Like, she's got that accent, like she's got that sort of, you can hear it sometimes, she's got that sort of German, sort of European accent.
I didn't notice that. I thought she was fine. I thought the accent was fine.
There were a couple scenes like where dialogue did teeter over into that. Very small.
But you can say that about every character.
Definitely, absolutely. Yeah. But just from a casting standpoint, it was brave to cast her, you know what I mean, as an American.
Right, so instead of taking this big mythical approach where Robert Redford's playing George Washington riding out there on the front line, it shows this big historical event from the point of view of the common man. Tom Dobb is just this average guy, this hunter, this fur trapper in poverty with his son, and he's literally pulled into this. Yeah. And it's sort of his reaction to it. And
I love that about it. I mean, every time I watch a war movie, I'll watch, sometimes I won't be looking at like the main character, I'll be looking in the backgrounds to see like other people fighting or whatever, and always thinking about, you know, what's that guy's story, you know what I mean? What's he fighting for? Like, is he fighting for his wife? Is he fighting for patriotism? Is he fighting for both? You know, what is he thinking? And this definitely puts us in the shoes of somebody who is, you know, a tiny person in this huge event. And I think it's fantastic that the script, you know, and the director chose to actually focus on him in a very realistic way. And by the end of the movie, you don't feel that Al Pacino has had any influence on the outcome of the war. You know what I mean? Whereas a movie like The Patriot, Mel Gibson absolutely has an influence on like the battle scenes. You know what I mean?
Well, it's Mel Gibson, so he's single-handedly
He single-handedly won the American Revolution. You know what I mean?
It's Mel Gibson. It's understandable though.
And yeah, I mean, and this movie isn't worried about that. This movie is not worried about that at all. This movie knows what the outcome is, and this movie just wants to focus on one tiny part of it, and it's a tiny part that's exciting. You know, and it's an exciting role.
One of the most controversial aspects from the people who've actually heard and seen in this movie is the politics. It's like, okay, is it pro-British? Is it pro-American? Here you have Hugh Hudson is an English director. The movie was shot in the United Kingdom, and it's about the most significant, probably single historical event in American history. Yeah. So there's a lot of backlash from that. But then it is a movie where Tom Dobb, the director, calls him an anti-hero. Like you said, it's not Mel Gibson running through the fields, just kicking ass and taking names like, America, fuck yeah, let's go.
Massacring the British.
Massacring the British, you know, like, you know, Al Pacino throws a hatchet and it comes back like a boomerang, and it's not that movie. What I like about it, though, in that regard, is I don't think it does take any sides. It's like, this is the carnage, this is the violence, war is a horrible, dirty thing, but eventually nobility comes out of it. At the end, like, you know, Tom Dobb, after he's forced into it, he realizes the significance of it, that, you know what, it was worth fighting for liberty.
And that there were people like us during the war, you know what I mean? Like, there weren't just like heroes on the front line, you know, winning the war for us. There were people who were struggling to keep their family alive. There were people who were caring for each other during the war, you know, who were lost in this unorganized society, that's trying to sort of hit back at this, you know, authority that they want out of their land, you know. And so I think it's a great focus for a movie, and I think it turned out really well. I mean, I really do like it. And talking about their decision to shoot in England, it really didn't bother me. It didn't bother me
because you didn't even know it at first.
I didn't know it at first, and I didn't notice throughout the whole movie. Like, it didn't bother me to the point where I was like, all right, I don't buy it. Like, I check out, you know what I mean? But I mean, I guess the second time I saw it, I did notice that there were like some coastal scenes where, you know, I'm sure those places were shot in England. Like, you could definitely tell, but it wasn't. I feel like it was just a reason for reviewers to beat up on a movie while it's down. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, it's one of those things where just like Al Pacino's accent, it's one of those things where, like, all right, they're joining all the other negative reviews, and they're just writing reviews just to write bad things about the movie. And it almost seems unfair. Like, it really was unfairly treated, you know? I think it deserves a second look from people.
Even with all the horrible reception this movie got when it came out, you know, almost non-existent reception because nobody saw it, in 2009, Warner Brothers let Hugh Hudson go back and slightly recut the film and put a voiceover narration with Al Pacino basically giving his commentary on what's going on the screen as it is from his character's point of view. What did you think of Rev-o-lution Revisited?
It seemed like the narration complemented it, you know what I mean? Since not a lot of people talk to each other in the movie, it seems like the narration was there to clarify things for people. And to actually give the motivation to Al Pacino's character, give them more, or give us more to care about for them and everything. I think the narration worked for me. I mean, I didn't really think ill of it until I saw the original version.
What is interesting, I was the same way. The first version I saw was Rev-o-lution Revisited. You watch the film, and the first hour, I think it's fairly strong. You're following the story, you're sort of engaged in what's going on. But then about halfway through, it sort of loses its footing. You almost get the impression that, did they not have a finished draft of the script? Because the way it's structured, it's like the first half is pretty solid, but then it gets to a point where the movie has scenes that need to be included to move the story along, but there's not a lot of meat to the bone. It just feels like it's missing, and they're just like, okay, we need this shot, we need this obligatory scene. But it does feel like the movie is missing chunks of connective tissue.
It is. I mean, you can definitely tell. That's what I tried to see when I saw it a second time, is how well the individual sequences hold together, you know what I mean? How well, like, once they're done with one sequence with Al Pacino, how well does it cut to the next scene? How much does that make sense? Like you said, it does make, they did do a good job of it in the first hour, but afterwards it just feels like it's sort of jumbled together. You know what I mean? Like they're, like you said, no connective tissue, nothing to really.
It's a series of sequences, just scenes that happen.
Exactly, just to get to the end of it. And I know Hugh Hudson complained about how they didn't get like an extra few months of shooting or something, and who knows if that really was the problem, you know what I mean?
I think it is. It makes sense, because you can tell from his previous films that had solid scripts, that are good movies, and he knows how to direct a film. And obviously, the direction is good. The cinematography, the costumes, the performances, for the most part, everything is solid. It just doesn't have that blueprint. It doesn't have that solid foundation. So let's say he had another 6 months to film. It could have been a masterpiece. Yeah. As it is, I don't think it's fair to call the movie a mess, because there's a lot of good stuff going on in it, and there's a lot of merit in the film, but it's not this undiscovered classic. It's not like you go back and watch it and it's just like, why have I not heard of this film? It's not this great Godfather caliber movie we've never heard about, but then again, it's not this train wreck either. There's a lot of good to it. It's just sort of this middle of the road film that it gets by with the bare minimum when it could have been something really great. Especially since we like the original version more, you know, like we were surprised about that. It was something that surprised me definitely, just because I don't see what gave it such a negative reaction. You know, what gave people such a negative reaction. And I mean, the movie, we're talking about the movie like it's like this masterpiece and everything, and like it's an amazing movie. But I think there are definitely problems with it. Oh, there are flaws in it. It's a flawed film.
There are definitely problems with the movie. There are definitely issues. I mean, I had issues with the movie. You had issues with the movie. There were parts that didn't work for me. But I liked it enough to where I'd recommend it to people. I'd like it enough to where I'd actually bring it up in conversation when talking about, I don't know, Al Pacino or war movies. Yeah, exactly. I'd bring it up and I'd recommend it to people. Whereas just based on word of mouth or things I read about it when you told me about it, I probably just would have kept it in the back of my mind and I wouldn't have really brought it up. So I'm glad you brought it to me. I'm glad I got to watch it, and I think it's definitely a movie that people should check out. Go in with an open mind, and I think there's definitely some excitement to be had watching it.
And you watch it now, there are scenes, it does drag, it does kind of move along slowly, and there's scenes that are missing. But I've always believed, as an artist myself, I understand criticism, so I understand to give credit where credit is due. If the movie's a piece of shit, I'm going to say it's a piece of shit, but I don't believe in throwing the baby out with the bathwater. There's a lot of great stuff going on in this film.
I agree completely.
Well, Joey, it was awesome to have you on the show.
It was great to be on the show, Ryan.
Thank you so much. Rev-o-lution. I hope you guys enjoyed our little chit-chat, and I hope it's motivated you to go out and grab a copy, because at the end of the day, this is just our opinions. These aren't facts. It's certainly a movie that's worth a look, so I hope you guys enjoy it. I'm Ryan Bijan.
And I'm Joey Monroy.
Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time.
And the shot around the world was the start of the revolution. The Minutemen were ready on the move. Take your powder, take your gun, report to General Washington. Hurry in.